Well, look, it's my really great pleasure to introduce to you our speaker tonight. She's flown all the way from New Zealand to come and speak to you. I'm just wondering if any of you have read any of her book. Oh, a few. Yes, lovely. Okay, good to know. Well, Suzy is a former professional educationalist, author, researcher, experiencer and public speaker. She's the author of The Dual Soul Connection, The Alien Agenda for Human Advancement, with contributions by Dr. Rudy Schill, who is the Emeritus Professor of Astrophysics at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics in Cambridge in the USA. If you haven't seen Suzy's books before, she's got some for sale over there. I think there's still some left. She's also the founding director of the UFORQ New Zealand Research Network, which covers all the New Zealand sightings and encounters, and coordinator of Communicator Link, which advocacy and support for experiencers and abductees. She was instrumental in lobbying for the release of the New Zealand MOD UFO files in 2010-2011. She's lectured internationally since 1997 about New Zealand UFO sightings and her own contact experiences with non-human intelligence and extraterrestrials in the USA, the UK, Canada, Australia, Denmark, Norway and New Zealand. She's featured in interviews and articles and documentaries, including New Zealand's 60 Minutes, The Truth Is Out There, Korean TV, National Geographic's Invasion Earth series, and writes for international UFO magazines. Suzy's focus for the last decade has been on encouraging members of the scientific community to participate in examining the wealth of science-related detail contained in accounts of human interactions with extraterrestrial species consciousness, as well as aspects of UFO sighting investigation, data relating to technology and physics. And she's going to be covering that tonight. She believes one of the major issues facing mankind in the future will be open contact with other civilizations in the universe. And in the meantime, there's much to be learnt from humans who have already made this tremendous leap in consciousness and who have witnessed the vast array of potential benefits available to mankind and our environment through such associations. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please give our guest speaker, Suzy Hansen, a warm round. A big welcome.
Thanks. Just manoeuvre my way around here into this cubby hole. Thank you very much for your warm welcome, and it's really nice to be able to see some familiar faces and faces that I've met on other occasions when I've been here. Can you hear me with this?
Yeah.
Good, okay. So thank you first of all to Cheryl and the committee for inviting me here and arranging other speeches down in Sydney for me. It's a great delight to see Cheryl again, and Barry, of course, who has yet to make me a cup of tea, but I've made him a lot. So yes, it's lovely to be amongst like-minded people. In New Zealand, it's a little bit like being an island on your own. New Zealanders are not that good at coming forward with their experiences. They don't mind the sightings, but experiences, you are squeezing it out of them. So, you know, there's one or two or three of us there who have been speaking for a number of years, but it's not like Australia. And of course, we've got a tiny population. We haven't reached 5 million yet, so we do pretty well, I suppose. Okay, so tonight I'm going to be giving a speech about alien technology, and we won't start it. We'll go through a few little slides first to get you prepped for that. I am not a scientist at all. I don't profess to be one, but for many years I have tried to get scientists to take notice of what many experiencers are able to talk about. Years ago it was very difficult. They would sometimes answer your emails or your letters, and at other times, no, they didn't want to know, they wouldn't reply. That is really seriously changing now, and there's a number of reasons for that, all of which I'm sure that you're quite well aware of, how more people are coming forward with their experiences worldwide, how science is kind of catching up to what many mediums, clairvoyants, experiencers and abductees have been talking about for many years, and they're confirming some of those things. So I think that we are moving along the right track. A lot of scientists contact me in New Zealand, especially after my book came out, and talk to me privately, but they don't want their name to go out there. They don't want any recognition or any details put out there that might reveal who they are. And they say that some of them say their grant would be gone by lunchtime the next day if they divulged anything or aligned themselves with someone like me. Okay, so we're going to go through a few slides that will get you maybe thinking a little bit about the position that I am in, and many other people like me, like Judy here, and many others who've come forward over the years with their information. Get you thinking about that, and then we'll move on to the actual body of the talk itself. Okay, so that's my book. There's a few copies over there. Some of them have sold already. I printed it in 2014, put it out February 2015, and it's a culmination of a lot of years research, thinking, and writing, and taking notes, and speaking, and talking to other people. And I got a lot of guidance from the ETs. I don't like to use that word, but I will use it because you will recognise it. The ETs that I've had contact with, and something they told me about the book would be that it would be multi-levelled. So some people will read it and get something out of it. Other people will read it and get something deeper out of it. Some people will read it again and again, and I get people all around the world saying, I've read it 3 times, and every time I read it, I recognise something else or whatever. So that was confirmation to me that what they said was exactly correct. So just a bit of background. My experiences started in childhood. In fact, they started before childhood, but you would have to listen to one of my spiritual speeches, outlining the agenda, which is what I normally talk about, and I'm departing from that tonight. So if you want to hear that, you'll have to listen to some of my speeches on YouTube channel, Suzy Hansen channel. So I used to see glowing figures by my bed, which my mother said were probably guardian angels, or they were the spirits of relatives who'd passed over coming to check on me, and I knew it was neither of those because of the size of their head and their height. And they communicated telepathically, and they would take me somewhere, do things, bring me back, etc. So right from very early childhood, I had that as this constant in my life. On board craft, I had memories of being in playrooms with other children, strange-looking children. Of course, I didn't know they were ETs, they were just odd-looking children, and human children as well, and mixtures. And we were taught to do things with our mind, levitate things, create things with the mind, and learning to communicate telepathically, which was really one of the major functions of these groups. When I was 8 years old, I was taken into a room and introduced to a whole lot of little soul lights, and told that there was something I had to do in life, and that these soul lights were people who had already incarnated or were going to incarnate, I had not yet, who would play a role in my life for a variety of reasons. And that was quite a daunting experience. The Greys left the room, left me standing there communicating with them, and these balls of light would come towards me, and they would communicate through consciousness, which is all things. So they were able to show me images of maybe what they would look like when I met them, or snippets of the life and the events that surrounded those coming times. But at that point, it was the first time consciously as a child that I realised there was something else that was a part of me. I won't say inside of me, because born-again Christians would say it was a devil. But it was a part of me, an integral part of me, and that was when at the end of that session with all those little balls of light, they said to me, they thanked me, and this, like a pink mist came out of their body, and they articulated a crystalline sound, and I looked down at my white pyjamas and saw that there was a pink mist coming out of my body too, and I was in some way responding to them in kind. And I described it as feeling as if I had two brains, two heads, two minds, and that was my first introduction to what I describe as the dual soul identity, or the dual soul. And later on in life, having my first child, I had been introduced to a ball of light on the craft, a blue ball, as an 8-year-old, and I'd been told it was the soul of my future son. And when I was 28 and having my first child, I was taken on board the craft, and what they called a merging procedure took place, where that soul entered my body and the body of the child I was carrying. And so moving forward to 2011, 2012, 2010, as much later in life, I'm in my 50s and I'm on a craft and I'm faced with those soul lights again, only this time they were people who were about to lose their lives in tragedies and earth changes on the planet, and humans were singled out to lecture to them, talk them through this process on a consciousness level, and ask them to reincarnate, if they're willing to reincarnate quickly when they pass over, for their soul to come to the greys, get that education and preparation to go back down into the planet really quickly and help implement changes on into the future. Now, Dr. Rudy Schild contributed to my book, and in footnotes, scientist's epilogue and commentary. I couldn't contact him for a number of years. I saw him in a DVD and felt that I recognised him, felt as if I knew him. Of course I didn't. But I eventually got in contact with him and asked him if he would be willing to look at some of my manuscript. He started with 1 or 2 chapters, came back to me, said yes, this makes sense. And then he asked for more, and he liked that, and he said, send me the one you think that is just so far out there I'm going to balk at it. So I sent him that, and he came back to me highly delighted and said, that's the one I understand the most so far in terms of physics and consciousness. So from there he actually asked me if he could become a part of the book. I didn't ask him. I was just hoping he might help me understand some of the science I talk about, because as I said, I'm not a scientist. Early this year in February, I spoke at the International UFO Congress in Phoenix, and it was a little bit of a departure for me, because they actually said to me, they invited me, and I told them what I'd like to speak about, and they said, well, we've heard half of a speech that you did at Phoenix MUFON about the alien technology, and we'd actually like you to talk for a full hour and a half on that. So I put together a speech which you're going to see some of tonight, with some new information in there. And this is where I said earlier on, science is starting to come on board, because after my speech, I was approached by quite a number of scientists, including a NASA scientist, a medical specialist, biochemist, all kinds of scientists, who have each in their own way over Skype assisted me with understanding the material that I am talking about at a deeper level, because I don't have that kind of scientific knowledge. So we're still actually, some of us, working our way through some of the other information in my book, and it's been an extremely enlightening experience for me. I'm sure that the Congress asked me to speak about technology because of the recent soft disclosures from the United States, the Pentagon guy and stuff like that. They probably thought, oh, that'll be good, it'll fit into the program. But by asking me to do that, they actually did me a favour, because I've met all these scientists who are on board in quietly supporting people like me in the background. So we've had some sudden advances in technology. We've got, and that's even quite recently in the last 10 years, the last 20 years. In the last 10 years it's escalated, and it's going to continue to do so year by year, month by month. And we're looking at new physics, what Dr. Schild calls new physics, things that we didn't understand before that we finally do understand, or we understand differently. So that's one aspect of the sudden advances. And he also poses the question, are we following the same path as the ETs, the same path or line of physics? Are we coming along behind them, making discoveries that they've already discovered, you know, thousands, hundreds of years ago? Or is this advance in technology part of the ET intervention? And I describe this very much in my book as part of the agenda. They are feeding stuff to us. A lot of experiencers are being given information, and some of those experiencers are working in science and are scientists. Is it information generally coming from experiencers, contactees and abductees that some scientists are working on? Is it back-engineered technology from craft that have been downed? Is it leaked technology from somewhere like DARPA, CIA? Are there military black government deals with the ETs? Or is this just part of our natural evolution that we should move forward in leaps and strides? So keep that in mind. Okay. Now the thing that really has annoyed me over the years is the amount of people who say, you've got no proof that you've been on a craft. Okay, they're right in a sense, aren't they? Because we don't have real evidence, and I've written this in layman's terms here. Number one, we don't have real evidence like tangible things like a weapon or some piece of equipment that we've slipped into our underpants, because remember, we're usually in our nightwear, and taken off the craft, as if that would happen. Is this sophisticated, these sophisticated people, are they so stupid that they would let someone get off a craft with a piece of their technology? They'd know immediately, because they would read your mind. Oh, I've got a bit in my pocket. Too late, it's gone. All right, demonstrative evidence like charts, graphs, photos. No, we don't carry a camera in our pyjamas. We're not going to be able to take a photo on a craft. It's ridiculous, isn't it? But these are the facile arguments that that people put forward, skeptics, etc. Documentary evidence like a letter or a document, a free pass onto the craft for the night. No, that's not going to happen either. Testimonial, witness testimony. Yes, there's plenty of witness testimony, but getting people to believe it or listen to it. People, when I say people, I mean outside of the UFO field, the general public and science and professionals. Corroborative evidence, supportive evidence. Well, there is about our best bet as experiencers and abductees is to find not just the common evidence that so many of us are familiar with, that people like David Jacobs has been instrumental in bringing to the fore, but also we're talking about very detailed, minute information that someone on the other side of the world might have that you've got. And that is like looking for a needle in a haystack. And I have spent the last 44 years doing that. And it's finally coming to fruition. Not only from other experiencers talking about very detailed information and corroboration, but also things that we described decades ago that science has only just discovered. So how did we know that? So corroborative evidence, there you are, is our best one. And that's what I'm going to be looking at tonight. And you know, there'll still be skeptics who won't be happy with that. So Michio Kaku, the theoretical physicist, said what we usually consider as impossible are simply engineering problems. There's no law of physics preventing them. So these self-imposed laws that humanity has made over the years, we're finding these branches off here and there's branches off there and there's a deeper level there. So there's a great deal being discovered that we wouldn't have dreamed of. So while we're going through the accounts that I'm going to talk about tonight, I want you to think of the role of telepathy, sentiency, that's feeling, and consciousness in alien technology. And most importantly, the role of spirituality and consciousness in our future technology. We'll go back to that later. Okay, so tonight's speech, the alien technology, the new physics of consciousness and intelligent light. And the first experience I'm going to talk about covers consciousness-assisted quantum or 3D technology, so their computers and other aspects of the technology, space discoveries to do with light and anti-gravity. Now, I'm going to describe to you one experience on craft here, and I had full memory of this. If you can imagine waking up in the morning and having this whole thing like a chapter in a book laid out in your mind, being able to remember the technology, the feeling about it, the emanation from the greys, what they were discussing, the emotions that they were putting forward to you, and the feeling of this test situation that we were in. So, in my book, chapters 29 and 30, there was so much information I had to put it into two chapters, the test part 1 and 2. And this occurred way back in 1993. Now, just a little note here, we didn't have television in New Zealand then. Sorry, computers rather. We didn't have computers, sorry. I saw some quizzical looks there and I thought, hang on, I've said something wrong. So computers started coming into homes in 1995. I didn't touch a computer until 1998 and I was terrified of it, and I was taught how to type up in Word on it, and I vowed and declared that my handwriting was much easier to do, but of course now I don't agree with that. But so back in 1993, computers were only in institutions and the legal system, hospitals and education in New Zealand, not for the general run of people. So there's a lot of information we're going to go through a little slower now through this experience and look at the technology within this one experience that I have researched for since 1993 with this one experience and others. This is just one of the ones I've been looking at. So the first thing is, there we are in a corridor, 16 adults, there were 3 greys with us, and you'll notice it's darker at each side of the corridor there. So as you walked along, the air around you seemed to light up. So there was no visible light source, and that's quite a familiar thing that you will have heard of, that people describe. So there was some sensors, or there was something in the walls that made the air light up around us. We were being taken to a room, and we were told by these elders, I call them elders up the front, tall greys. There were quite a lot of short greys in there as well, a real mixture. These ones were wearing robes with a kind of insignia braid, if you want to call it, around the neck. They are not often seen by humans, or certainly by me. They are usually present when there is a significant situation taking place, and they'd come to monitor it. So we were being given a test, and each of us, 16 humans, were given a task to do of differing subject matter, but of the same difficulty and complexity of information. And the test was not to see who could get the right answer. The test was to see whether you could actually use the technology and the means of accessing the consciousness in the technology that they'd been teaching you for a long time. That was the test. So we were each assigned a grey partner. That symbol on the board there is not the kind of symbol that I'll be talking about later on. That is sort of like a bridging script halfway between what we know as a written language of some sort and halfway between theirs, but it contained every single information about me that they knew. So we were given a download, we were given a huge amount of information within a very short time, about a minute and a half. It was like absorbing whole encyclopedias and having to be able to access that. Now this is the first interesting thing. You see the word tablet there? We all take those for granted now, but this is 1993. They hadn't been invented. And we were each given like a little plastic sheet. I described it, because I had no other way of describing it in those days, as being like a little X-ray sheet, because that's what it looked like, sort of a little darkish plastic, very thin, flexible, you could bend it. And embedded in this thin plastic were these images, boxes of script. There was like a map there, you can see on the right. There was a planet that was breathing. It's breathing like its magnetic field was going like this, and then a group of 3 planets down the bottom left doing the same. And my task, sorry I'm a bit asthmatic, my task was to find the way through this little planetary system without disturbing the magnetic fields. That was my task. And there you are. I was fascinated by this tablet because it seemed to be, the images seemed to be alive, and they stood, it's impossible for my husband to draw 3D for you, but they stood out. They stood out from this tablet in the same way that we would know now 3D. If we go to the movies and we put our 3D glasses on, we see images standing out. Whoops. Okay, so we began this test, and you'll notice there that there's a page hanging in the air which my husband's drawn with lines so that you can see where it is. The imagery, as I said, was standing out from the screen, but he can't draw that. And I was able to go through all of this information just like that and find what I thought was appropriate to use for this task. And I was also able to flip out into the air. Now this still sounds incredible to me. Flip out into the air this a script or diagrams or whatever, and hold it there and access with my mind other things to do, you know, within the data that I'd been given. But I was also at the same time able to access what I now know was an internet, an alien internet. So through the computer itself, with my right hand there on that rubbery pad, I was able to tap into their conscious technology and tap into this whole other raft of material and go through it all at lightning speed. Can I do that here? No. But when you're up there and you're in a heightened state of awareness, and they've got you to expand out your aura and your consciousness, and you are tapped into their amazing, invigorating technology, you can do it. And we will. We are moving that way now. Now, the little guy standing next to me there, his brain was, I describe it as being like a motor running beside me. And I was also occasionally tapping in to what he's thinking. Now, he started giving me some information, not cheating or anything like that, but they always try to educate you whenever they can. And so he was giving me some added information along the way. And he talked to me about ribbons or rivers of energy through space. And he talked about how they traverse these ribbons of energy in their craft. It's not quite how we sometimes imagine they might move through space, although they may do that as well, you know, drawing up and then boing, off they go, like Star Trek. This was more not wishing to disturb magnetic fields, because disturbing magnetic fields disturbs the life force that lives within them. And so they said that that's the macrocosm and the microcosm. So through space there are these ribbons that they can follow. Within solar systems where the magnetic fields are interacting between those planets and their sun, there's a different flow. And so they tap into that flow within the solar system, and then down to the microcosm they come into our atmosphere, and they find the same thing. We have got these flows of energy, we have got flows of weather patterns around the planet, we've got emissions of energy, we've got areas where there's strange turbulent energy, and so they need to be aware of this and flow along with that and utilize that to move so that they're not upsetting our nervous systems and our health. That was told to me in 1993. And he commented also that thousands of aircraft traverse our skies daily, and we will eventually understand the harm this disturbance to natural energy fields is causing to life on Earth, affecting our health and nervous systems, as well as the pollution caused by fuel consumption. Coming back to this tablet now, let's look at that the script boxes. Oh, wrong way, sorry folks. Okay, now there's a script box. That's just a make-believe one. But you can see that they're sort of grouped in certain ways. One's sitting out on its own, one's down to the right there. And whereas a lot of experiencers talk about being able to read script and interpret script that sometimes other experiencers write, I've never been able to do that, because I think, and it's only my theory, but somewhere along the line I feel I've been told something like this. I think it is a bridging script that people like Jim Sparks was forced to learn how he writes about in his book. He was forced to learn this script. He didn't really want to. And I think that that's a bridging script that assists them to educate us in some way, in a written form, in a script form. But I believe that that bridging script is slowly going to move humanity towards the consciousness aspect that I actually used on Craft and other people in the groups of humans I was with, which I call depth reading. So depth reading the alien script. And that simply means that you're traversing the data with your mind and consciousness. You're not reading the script symbol and interpreting it as an A or a B or a word. You take your mind, you look at the script, and in you go. So I can liken it to icons on a computer. Click onto Google, Chrome or whatever, into your website, into a website you go, into a page on a website, into a link on the page, and deeper and deeper and deeper into that website, okay? That is the philosophy behind it. So depth reading is the script, as I was taught to do. You completely bypass having to know what the script means. The script is a focus of a symbol that you interpret, and then you go into it. And it's all with the mind. It's not reading pages and pages, it's just going in, and you're going like this until you find what you want. So that's what I was having to do on this occasion. So at the end of the test, there were 4 of us that passed, me and 3 males, and so that test ended, and all of the rest of the 15 went off down a corridor, and I was asked if I would take all of those tablets down to the next level and pass them in before going back to where they were. So how did I do that? I walked to the end of the corridor and I stepped into what I have described since publicly since 1997 at a conference as a light elevator. And you can see it there on the left. It was a tubular piece of equipment, rather like a perspex, and inside it was this vibrant blue and white light that seemed to be going up and down at the same time. I don't know how else to explain that, just going up and down. It made a slight hum. You stepped into it, there was no floor, so it was a leap of faith, and you were suspended in what seemed like liquid light. So it felt like velvet against your skin. It felt soft, as if you'd just got into tepid water, but it wasn't water, it was something else. It was like a combination of that and light. And once again, you used your consciousness to think of the appropriate symbol that was associated with the level you wanted to go to. There's a moment of blackness, you're somewhere else, the door opens and out you get. So in this case I went down a level, and there was a female entity, believe it or not, she's a female, sitting at a console, and there was a screen on the wall which attracted my attention. So I had a good look at that, and pictured on this screen was a dome. You can see that coming down on the left hand side there, and I was completely intrigued because it was like a garden, and it had like an artificial sunlight in there, and there was a grey and a human deep in telepathic conversation walking along. There was a seat. I thought, what the hell? And I asked her about it, and she said, you're not supposed to see that. Not that I wasn't supposed to see it, but they're very officious and they're very compartmentalised. So if you're there for one reason, you don't want to be going into this reason. There just isn't time. So it disappeared, and it became a wall. no longer visible as a screen, seamlessly became a wall. No outline of a screen, nothing, just a wall. And while I was standing there, I heard a sound behind me, turned around, and in front of a archway of a doorway there was what I describe as a hybrid. I'm not really au fait with whether it was a hybrid or a transgenic, but everyone calls them hybrids, so I'll call them that, seeing as you understand it. He was part human, a very small part human, part grey. He had vibrant blue eyes, and he looked like a little old man, but I knew that he was quite young. But he looked like an arthritic person, and completely baffled by his presence, which was hugely intense. The intelligence and the emanation from his body was incredible. And I stammered telepathically. I knew there was something very special about him, and I said, "Can you give me some advice for my life?" Which was probably a rather selfish question. Oh, what have I done? And he turned around and he telepathically said to me, "Corroboration." At first I was a little disappointed because I didn't think that was, you know, very stunning, but I thanked him and he moved away. And later on in my life, when I began to look at my experiences and realise there had to be a better way to convince or teach people that this is real, suddenly that word took on tremendously new meaning, and you'll find out why in just a minute. And you'll notice there that the slit in his eyes is horizontal. My husband drew the picture, he had it vertical, which seemed more like a reptilian. And I said, "No, that's not how it was. Can you redraw it?" He said, "It's taken me hours. I'd have to do it all again, you know. I can't rub it out." But I made him draw the whole thing again. So this picture is, you know, like 3 feet high. It's absolutely exquisite. The PowerPoint doesn't do it justice. He had to do it again because it had to be right. Okay, so let's go back now through this, briefly through this, and look at the information contained within this one event that is now corroborated not only by other experiences, but validated by new scientific discoveries since 1993. So let's look first at this tablet. In 1993 I described it as a thin flexible information tablet, no visible power source, 3D images, holographic like images if you like, and it could be inserted into a larger computer like a USB. And of course you all know that tablets now exist. They're about roughly the same size as what I described back then. But I described it as being flexible. You could roll it up, you could bend it. And now in the New Zealand Herald in 2013, I saw an article that they're unveiling prototype laptops that can be rolled up and tucked in your pocket. I won't bother reading all of that, but there you are. And from 2010 through to 2017, they've continued to say they're developing, they envision flexible tablets that resemble an iPad. You can shake it to give it power, it can be rolled up, it's bendable, it's conductive paper, plastic paper, enabling flexible electronics. So we're into the 2010s, 2011s, etc. And I was using something like that and describing it in layman's terms in 1993. Is that corroborative evidence of contact? Okay, so the holographic 3D images, mind meld images where you take something out and you swish it around your mind, you put it out in front of it, out of you, that equals the use of consciousness combined with technology. And that was 1993, we're really starting to develop that ourselves now. I'm not saying that this hasn't been being developed by DARPA in some dark laboratory somewhere in the States for many years, but we haven't seen it. And Dr. Schultz said, "I suspect that the technology Suzy used and witnessed was 3D, which would involve a deeper quantum development of computing much closer to consciousness itself and would be a giant leap for our civilization." The ribbons of energy through space that I described. Scientists now say there is a strange ribbon of energy and particles at the edge of our solar system, which serves as a sort of road map in the sky for the interstellar magnetic field. And now they have named this, which they've only discovered pretty much so far in the solar system, the Ibex ribbon, an interstellar magnetic field, ribbons of energy. Scientists discovered the ribbon in 2009 using NASA's Interstellar Boundary Explorer Ibex spacecraft, which orbits Earth but looks out to the edge of the solar system. The ribbon is made up of particles and energy that come from the heliopause, the boundary where the influence of the sun's magnetic field bumps up against the interstellar medium. So we now know that these ribbons of energy exist in space. And there's a diagram of it from NASA. It shows you shows you how it moves around and wraps around the planets in our solar system. There's a model of the interstellar magnetic fields wrapping around the outside of our heliosphere based on data from Near Explorer. The Gray also said aircraft cause harmful disturbances. They affect our health and nervous systems. They cause pollution and they use excessive fuel consumption. In 2016, I found an article in a newspaper. A satellite had taken a photo of a test rocket. And they are now, you can see that's the shock waves from the test rocket going through the atmosphere. Now we have explosions in aircraft and jumbo jets and you name it, hundreds of them, thousands of them every day around our planet, and they're all sending out waves like that. So what the Gray said back in 1993 about how this affects our nervous system is now proven by science. And they're now looking at producing new supersonic aircraft that will not create so much of this this atrocity in the atmosphere, and they'll be able to be brought in over populated areas, whereas at the moment they cannot because of the supersonic capacity. So more corroboration. Depth reading the script, the alien script. Is this an advanced form of perceptual or intuitive learning? Now I'll explain that to you. In some universities I discovered recently in the States, they are doing some testing with students because today's information is now double, quadruple, many hundreds of times more than it was when, say, I was training as a teacher. So students today are faced with massive amounts of data and complex information. And how do they go about sorting what they need for something? Even if they've got specific texts that they need to follow, research people are going to go much wider than that. How do you decide what you're going to use? It would take you a month of Sundays to read through all of this stuff. So they are doing experimentation with groups of students where they use their intuition and they bring up some text on a screen and they have a look at it and they think they learn to feel intuitively. And they can put their hand over the screen if they like. They can sit there and they can, a few seconds of meditating on it. Does this feel like it's what I need? Does it align with a frequency I'm looking for? No. Okay, next page. Next article. Does that feel right? No. So they're not even reading the information, they're feeling the frequency. Okay, so why did I bring that up again? Let's have a look. Oh yes. Okay, so now let's look at the light elevator itself. I described it to you before, light going up and down, soft, velvety, and when I was 12 I used one as well and was worried about having to go in it on my own because I'd always gone with a grey. And I didn't want to go in it on my own, sat down, dipped my feet into it, had a little think about it before I got in, and he was somewhat amused. On the wall there you'll see there's a panel and it's got flashing lights, etc., and that's to do with the function of the light elevator. Now when I was doing some research for a speech, I had a look on the internet and I just typed in liquid light elevator, And when I typed in liquid light, up popped an image. And on a website, and I thought, oh my God, that looks very familiar, doesn't it? So I wrote to the Sky in the States and said, are you actually an experiencer of alien contact? Is this something you've experienced, or is this a fictional drawing? And this guy called Jeff came back to me and said, no, that's from a 1997 experience I had on a craft where I travelled in this elevator. So I asked him to, there was frantic emails going backwards and forwards, can you describe to me how it felt? And he used the exact same words as me. It's like velvet on your skin. It's like being in water, warm water, but it's not water, it's like light, it's a mixture. You think your way somewhere, you think of a script, a symbol, and you're there. So that, when I discovered this, it was like a fantastic moment where this word corroboration came slamming back at me, and how important it is. When I was in Australia speaking in Perth, I spoke to a support group, and a young girl came up to me afterwards with her mother, a teenager, and said, could I look at her folder of drawings of her experiences? And her name is not Anne, that's just a pseudonym. In 2005, and I saw that one, and I said, well, what is that? Is that like a column, or what is it? Does it support a building? Can you describe it to me? And she said, a tubular column of bright, soft, sparkling light that transports you elsewhere. So there we are. You can see the similarity for yourself, the description given by all three of us of how it functions and what you do and what it feels like. It cannot be denied. We're not all suffering from some hallucination in different places in the world. We've seen this and we've been in it. Dr. Schultz said the light elevator is almost certainly an anti-gravity device involving magneto-electric influence on gravity under thought control in interaction with the conscious intent of the enveloped sentient beings. And now in 2016 the news came out they're trying to develop liquid light technology in Cambridge, UK, where water is being infused with light, and it takes on another structure altogether. The 5-function screen, when I was speaking with the late Dr. Roger Lear here in Australia, he said to me, he was describing how a military person in the States had described to him going on board a craft that was at an Air Force base, and once they got inside the craft, he saw this window, and the military person showing them through said, actually it has 5 functions. It can be a wall, a window, a communication display screen, a surveillance screen, or an access to a mammoth database. And that is exactly what the lady told me. It's a 5-function screen, she said. But she didn't tell me the functions, he did. Okay, so we'll move on to this one now, and then we'll have a break. So potential medical and healing technology, and I'm going to look at 3 different instances where I've seen some particular technology. So let's start with a handheld scanning machine, and I'll show it to you in a minute. This is 1978, so I was only about 23 or something like that. So I was taken on a craft, and I hadn't been that well because I'd had a horrific car accident. And I had some bad health for a few years because of it. And he ran this handheld thing over my body, and I couldn't see the screen which was behind me and what it was showing. But I know that it was rectangular with a handle. It had rows of square red and white lights underneath, and it shone down a beam or light onto the body. It emitted a mild electric current sensation, just a tingly sensation. And he told me it could see into my body. And it's used to scan parts of the bodies and of your body, and he can send that data and images to the computer system on the craft, and then they have this whole information about your well-being in every organ and part of your body. And that's what it looked like. It looked a bit like a bat from where I was looking at it, with this this unusual reddy glow, pinky glow coming out of it. And as it was turned, I could see the underside, and it looked similar to that. In 2017, when I spoke at the Alien Cosmic Expo in Canada, I was at the Experience Earth session, which went for a full day. And this gentleman called Steve Boucher got up, and he started talking about one of his experiences. And he described the same thing. I nearly fell off my chair. So I ran up to him afterwards, and we sat down, had a good talk about it, and I videoed him speaking about it, and we were just so delighted to meet each other, and lots of hugs and lots of laughter that we could describe something so specific and in such detail. So this is his experience that was put into the QFORN, which is the Canadian UFO Research Network magazine. And this happened in the 70s, 71 I think for him, but it was put into the magazine in 1982, that's the magazine, and there's his drawing. He was given the pseudonym Jack, and he said it was an X-ray type device being used on him. Oops, and he talked about how the Greys put it on his arm and said, what's happened to your arm? And he said when he shone that on his arm, he could see his bones. Nothing else, just the bones, where that glow went on the arm. And he'd had a broken arm, and that's what the Grey had found. So it could look at organs, it could look at, you know, the skeletal structure, it could look at the connective tissue or whatever. Fast forward to 2013, and a company called Epson and Avena Medical unveiled smart glasses that allow nurses to see through a patient's skin to the vascular beneath, so that people like me whose veins are hard to stick a needle into, or to even find, they can use this technology to do it. And there we are. There's one of the handheld vein viewers that we've now developed. Hello. So what it does, it shines down a glow that shines on the hemoglobin in your veins and reflects back an image. It makes it easy for people who don't like needles very much, and you know the agony you go through when you're poking and prodding and tightening the thing around your arm waiting for it to happen. So that's that finished. And now from 2007 onwards they're producing them all over the place. So there we are. There's the underside of one at top left and the underside of mine top right. Bottom left, the underside showing a vein viewer. In the middle we got Steve's drawing. On the right we got mine. Okay, moving on to 1978. It's a little bit different, but I was with a group of humans on a craft who were shown images like a holographic. This is a quick mock-up my husband did the other day on Photoshop. You'll recognise me in the pink nightie in quite a few pictures. He just inserts it here and there. Anyway, so we were shown human bodies floating in the air, and then we were shown them floating in the air with an aura around them, a frequency field, and we were taught to identify from that frequency field what might be the health problem. But we didn't just do it by looking at the aura. We took our consciousness inside the aura, right inside the energy field. So you take your consciousness in there, not your hand, your consciousness in there, and you feel and you look and you absorb and you intuitively make an assessment. And some of the people in the group said, I can't do that, I've got no medical knowledge. No, they said, put all of that medical knowledge that you might have out of your mind, gone. You don't need it. Because we're talking about frequency and energy here. We're not talking about the medical knowledge that humans have. And moving on to 1996, we then were taught with a computer, and this is another mock-up he did the other day, that's not me. where the 3D image stood out from a computer screen, much larger than that there, but you know, it's just to give you an idea. And you could rotate the body, and you could tap and consciously ask the computer to show you just the bones, just the vascular system, just the organs, and you did another medical style assessment. You could splice it in half and turn it around so that you could see into the body that way. You could see the energy field within the body, which is a whole other thing I could talk about that most people don't realise is there. So there was splicing this way, across that way. There was changing the image so that it was just a whole lot of veins floating in the air, or bones, a skeleton floating in the air, and you made an assessment. You were looking for things and you were feeling the person, feeling them, not assessing strictly through the physical form. And in 1983, I was on a craft and I was being checked over because once again I had been ill, which seems to be the story of a lot of experiencers' lives. And on this occasion they had a ceiling-mounted version of this seeing into the body technology. So there was just a round circle on the ceiling, and from that came down this beam of something. I don't know whether it was light or energy, I have no idea. But when it shone down onto the body, they said, oh, you can prop yourself up on your elbows and have a look, which I did, and there was my rib cage. And on this occasion, one of my sons was with me, and he pulled over this like little pedestal bench thing and stood on it to get a better view, and thought it was absolutely hilarious. So then he just touched a little screen to one side, and he could change so that within that circle once again was my organs, my vascular system, or whatever he wanted, and the light could be stretched out so the beam would extend so that it covered your whole body or your head or whatever. They could just move it around, and all of that data was sent to the computer. The computer then analysed, or they analysed with their mind if it wasn't too complex, and there's the same situation of looking into the body. Now we have, in more recent years, remember that was 1983, in more recent years we've now got what a lot of universities and medical schools use to train their medical students, and this is an anatomage table. And what they do is they use the images of cadavers that they've scanned and x-rayed, etc. And so you end up with this visual feast of inside the body, but they're cadavers, not real living, breathing people, which is different again. So there you are, that's the sort of thing that I was looking at, you know. That's just a little gif for you to enjoy. Okay, now at the Congress, along the same lines of seeing into the body, this is the theme I'm talking about. After my speech, this guy came up to me, a lovely man, and said, "You need to know me." And he was a medical specialist. He was an executive doctor at a big hospital in the States, and he said, "We have got a machine now. It's new, it's only in 5 hospitals in the States, and it can see in the body, not as well as what you're describing, but it shows you, Suzy, that we're moving in that direction." So he said, "You can have my entire PowerPoint." So I've talked to him on Skype, lovely guy. When I go to the States later in the year to speak, I'm hoping to be able to go and see one of these machines. So this is the machine. Now look at the difference in the technology. Millions of dollars for that machine. And you lie on that grey bed thing and you put your head underneath that white bit at the top there. And I haven't got a pointer, but I probably have, but never mind. You can see on that blue image on the screen there, there's a diagonal white stick hanging down. Can you see that? Okay, so that's what the specialist uses. He holds on to that and he hauls that thing along that runway there so that it brings the scanner over the top of the person, and they take pictures, at that time when the person is on the table and the images come up on the screen behind them. Is this sounding familiar to what I've described? And in that picture up there you'll see there's a vascular system on that blue square, and so they use it mainly for when there's been a bleed or a artery blockage after an operation and a person goes into a state of shock and they're bleeding somewhere. They need to find the bleeder really quickly. Normally they go back into surgery and it could take 7 hours going through the body and trying to find that bleed. With this they just take the imagery, and it's real-time image of what's happening in the person's body, and they go straight in with keyhole surgery and fix it within a very short period of time, and they said so many people's lives are saved because of that. Okay, so that's just one of his slides he gave me, and unfortunately we couldn't get them to work. They worked at the Congress, but let's give it a shot. No, it's not going to work. Okay, so that is one of the slides, one of the images that they've taken, and if this was working, I forgot to put the file in with this, you would see it moving right around. So you'd see the backbone would change position and they'd go right around behind, come around again, and looking at the vascular system, looking at where the veins come out of the spine or whatever they need to look at. And the next one shows you a camera, like a wire being put up inside that artery to fix a bleed. So we are moving there. We're moving there. But look, in 1983 I was a housewife in New Zealand. I'd given up teaching for a while with 2 kids, and I was running the athletics club, cooking meals, doing washing. How would I know these things? And how would I know things that we are now doing? How would I know that? Okay, so there you are. You can see how simple their technology is, because they have mastered physics, they have mastered light, they have mastered frequencies, they've mastered energy, and they've got a circle on the ceiling that shines something down. Yes, there may be a lot of technology behind that, but look at what we use as opposed to that. We're moving that way. Now, just finishing off this bit here, 1978, one of the experiences I've just talked about, where I sat up on my elbows and looked at my rib cage, it took place on this craft, a massive satin or walnut shaped craft with little archways where smaller craft went in and out, and you'll see that light strip across the middle there, that where those little archways are and the light strip above it, that's the hangar. It goes right around the outside of the craft. It's massive. And the interesting thing for me coming in, looking at that and being told by the Greys what it was like, is that when we got inside that hangar we could see through that metal ceiling. We could see space, and from the outside we could see all the lights. Now, when I was researching for a speech year before last, I came across the JAL 1628 Japanese airline sighting over Alaska in 1986. Hello, does that look familiar? And look at that strip round the middle, and look at the little aeroplane there, the black aeroplane. That's how big he estimated his aircraft was against this craft. And you'll see, I'll see if I can point out, the very tip at the end there and the very tip there. See how he's done an oval there when he drew it? Okay, he did an oval. So look at my picture. You'll see that extra light bit at the end that's glowing, and that's because when you're outside the craft coming towards it, you are looking through that end. You're looking through the see-through ceiling to the next see-through ceiling and out. Whereas the bit in the middle, the strip in the middle, has got the interior of the craft behind it, so it's not quite so bright. Now he drew that little thing the same as what I wrote and described and talked about at a conference in 1997. Okay, so there we are, there's the comparison. And Robert Salas, good, we've got 3 or 4 minutes. I work very closely with Robert Salas. Some of you will know him, anyone doesn't know him. He's a military whistleblower in the States who was working in the Air Force at the Malmstrom Air Force Base in the late 60s when a craft came in and shut down the Minuteman missiles that were being raised up and tested, the nuclear warheads. And he took years to find out what had really happened to him and to go through all the Freedom of Information Act process, etc., to find the material he wanted. And he speaks worldwide, stayed at his place. We're very good friends. We talk on Skype, and he uses my material, I use his material, because we corroborate each other in many respects. And recently, Robert, you may have seen, some of you may have seen this on his Facebook page, wrote to me about a piece of metal that he had found, he'd come across when he was speaking in Argentina. He was shown a private collection of pieces of an alleged spacecraft that came down. And the lady who runs it said, regarding the case of this metal, it was an event that we cannot yet accurately establish the date of the event, but we understand that it was between the years 1980 and 85. 5 objects were observed in flight. 1 of them exploded in the air and fell to the ground. The police surrounded the area and recovered the fallen remains. The owner of the field was left with a piece of approximately 2 metres by 1.5 metres, and he took it to a metallurgist to identify what kind of metal it was. From that piece, a part was cut off, which you can see on screen. They did metallographic studies, and she has sent the result to Robert, and the piece, the peculiarity of the piece is it's translucent and you can see through it. And Robert wrote to me, this is one of the pieces of metal that was recovered after a sighting event. Note the vertical lines along the specimen. When I held this up to the sun, it was semi-translucent. For example, I could see movements of objects through the metal. There were no perforations in the metal that was allowing this to happen. I could see the movement of the shadow on the opposite side of the metal as people walked between the sun and the metal. So I have suggested to him that those lines are not active. So if this was connected to their technology, perhaps, and this is only me surmising, perhaps those lines may dictate how translucent it is and how see-through it is. There may be some kind of electric current running through it, something to do with physics that we have no idea of yet, that can regulate whether it's bright, whether it's closed off and becomes just a metal wall, or whether it's completely see-through. That's me surmising, but I suspect it could be right. And guess what? Around 2005, we discovered the use of aluminium oxynitride, or alon. It's a ceramic composed of aluminium, oxygen and nitrogen. It's optically transparent 80%. It's 4 times harder than fused silly glass. It can be fabricated using quite a simple ceramic powder processing technique. And it has combined optical and mechanical properties, and of course can be used in many military applications. So now, many years later, after I saw this see-through metal, we've discovered we can make it. So let's go back to the core principle, the role of spirituality and consciousness in future technology, which we will cover in the next hour. Thank you. Okay, so what is chapter 26 in my book? And it's called A Glimpse of Cosmic Culture. And it happened in this experience happened in 1989, and it involves what the Greys called their recreation, which was probably not a very well chosen concept, but it involved dematerializing their form and reforming. And just something I'd like to slip in here before I get going on this is that, you know, it can be quite competitive in the UFO field in that you hear people say, well, I'm in touch with light beings and you're in touch with 3D greys and all this kind of thing. Light beings are better, you know, greys are not. And that's just totally ridiculous, because the greys that I've had contact with are very positive. I'm not saying that there aren't species of greys that are not, because I also work with people who've had traumatic experiences. But I can only speak for the species that I've had contact with. And there are all different mixtures on board a craft, not only of greys mixed with other species, but there's other species involved in the agenda that I outline in my book that are all here at this time to assist us, not to save us, but to help us help ourselves, or as they said, change us from within. So using our own humans who've been trained by them to bring this to the fore, and we're talking about millions of people probably. So you have that spread around the world, it's going to have some kind of effect. How quickly depends on all of us. So, you know, the funny thing is I've arrived on a craft once and in the corridor were some greys just coming back into their grey form. And they were in the form of what people would consider light beings. And that's how they appear and work in another dimension. So it's silly to say, you know, mine are the best because they're light beings. It's just, you know, this is the same mindset that humans have of having to be the best or having to be better. And until we get past that, are we going to move forward? Okay, so that is a very white room. And on this occasion, a group of us, there was 7 of us taken into a room, and we were told that they were going to see how far they could stretch us, stretch our consciousness and our willingness to let ourselves go and really immerse ourselves in that consciousness and as close as possible to their level of it. And once we got into this room, when we looked out through the door, hello, antivirus. Let's cross that off. There is a God. Okay, so when we looked out through the door, it was like looking through a teardrop, because there was some kind of energy field, a very hackneyed and much used expression, but can't think of a better one, over that door. The door did not close. We walked through something, and it stopped whatever energy was in this room from leaking out. Now that's interesting, because I'll quickly tell you this. Robert Salas and I, he's developed speeches about his memories of undersea bases, and a lot of whistleblowers, military whistleblowers, who've been coming to him with information about being to undersea bases. I describe in my book being taken to an undersea base and also to underground bases. And when I was taken to an undersea base, the craft came in through the water, and it went through an energy field of some sort, and out of the water and into air, into a long tunnel that we travelled along for some time. It opened out into a massive hangar and then an office area. Now, Dr. Schultz said how on earth you know, his mind was trying to get around the fact of the pressure of water suddenly popping out of that and into air at depth. How did they do that? How did they put something across that entrance so that the craft just slipped through it? And so really looking out through that doorway, I can recall like looking through a teardrop, I think is the same concept of an energy field, something stopping this particular frequency that was inside this room from moving out. So when we got into this room, we were told by the grey who accompanied us that we were inside, like being inside a big mind, inside pure consciousness. So here we're talking about some kind of technology in that room being utilised to enhance consciousness. So people fear AI. We should only fear AI if we don't clean up our act about how we might use AI. This grey appearing in front of us began to alter his form in the sense that he looked like a negative from a film. So he went from having very visible features and texture of his skin and colour of his skin, etc., to looking like a black and white negative. That was the first change that he displayed to us. And then he told us to prepare ourselves because what we were about to experience could be, well, we might say mind-blowing. It could be deeply emotional, it could be deeply unsettling, it could be extremely euphoric. So he made the captivating statement we were about to be surrounded by pure thought and asked us to move towards the centre of the room. So we moved towards the centre of the room, and kind of out of this endless whiteness came different figures. There were quite a lot of them. That's just a mock-up I happened to do about an hour before we left tonight, because I didn't bring the right images to insert in here. So these figures came out of this white mist, if you want to put it that way, but it wasn't a mist. And all the while he was instructing us and reassuring us, and we really didn't know what to expect. And then everything seemed to get whiter and whiter, blindingly white, and the feeling of being everywhere at once. So you knew you were standing on a floor, you knew you were in a room, but all the parameters had disappeared. And it was the sensation of floating. Now it's interesting to note that after my book came out, I was contacted by a gentleman called Carlos in the States. He's a professor, and he was the subject in one of the chapters of Dr. John Mack's book Abduction. There's a whole chapter on Carlos. And Carlos had read my book and contacted me and said, "You're describing in this chapter exactly what I have experienced, and you're the first person I've found who can describe it identically." So here's corroboration again. Go, he said, if you've got the book, go and read the Carlos chapter. So I did, and oh my goodness me. Just page after page of him detailing what it was like to be in a room like this, in a state like this. And for example, I've just put a couple of quick examples there. He said in John Mack's book, the floor resembled a dance floor composed of dense matter. It was not solid, but I could stand on it, feeling that I was standing on open space beneath me. That's how he described it. He's very flowery with the way he expresses things, very beautiful way of expressing himself. And I simply said a vast room, an expanded space, a feeling as if I was floating, as if suspended in midair, although I could feel the soft floor. So here's the same feeling that is evoked by this state of consciousness. Slowly the entities in front of us began to take on an indistinct smudgy appearance, their outlines beginning to waver and shimmer. I'm quoting from my book here. So their features began to disintegrate. So it was like sand, fine grains of sand, like the dust from flour, a bag of flour just starting to lift off, and their bodies just started to disintegrate into light. And we were told, okay, we're going to colour that dust, that mist, that fine powder, if you want to put it that way, for a better way of describing it, so that you can see what we do. So instead of just disintegrating into this light, they disintegrated into showers of colour. So each entity was disintegrating into a separate colour. And I describe in the book this thought voice that was communicating, this grey, even though his body was disintegrating and he was rising up into the room in a shower of purple, the consciousness was still communicating with me. So the consciousness is separate from the physical state. So we saw this thing of all the colours coming off them, swirling up into the ceiling so that we could understand where they began to mix and mingle. And the thought voice from this grey was saying to us, give us something, produce something in your mind that you want us to form, and we'll do it. So someone asked them to form a pencil, and they formed a pencil with all of this dust, atoms, whatever it is. I'm not a scientist. Someone asked for a bee. There was a bee. A lotus flower. There was a lotus flower. So the form was changing, changing, changing. And as they merged and mingled, it became almost, it became extremely euphoric for all of us humans, to the point that I can only describe it as extreme joy. Now, most of us go through our lives and we have moments of being happy. We have moments of being very happy. Maybe ecstatic if we bought a new pair of shoes. But how many of us actually feel intense joy on a daily basis, or at all in our lives? Looking back on your life, when did you experience intense joy? So that is what we felt, this euphoric intensity, tears running down our faces. And they then said, and were inviting us to join them. Inviting us to join them. So what they really wanted was for us to let go the human mind, let go all the constraints that we hold to ourselves, let go and see if we could do that. We couldn't. We got close in the sense that we were feeling what they were feeling, but we couldn't let the body go on that occasion. Now Carlos writes, is quoted by John Mack in the book as being able to do that. He disintegrated into a shower of light. But on this occasion we couldn't let ourselves go enough to do that. So, coming back to the role of spirituality and consciousness in our future technology. How is our technology going to function in the future if we have not got consciousness into it, and we have not got spirituality in its use? We have a terrible track record on this planet of using modern technology and advanced technology developed largely by the military to harm each other, to obtain power, to wield power, to maim, to destroy, and we've been doing that probably for thousands of years, whether it be with sticks and stones or more modern technology. So our technology is moving at an extraordinarily fast rate, and on a daily basis, if I'm scanning through the internet and looking at the technology that's coming out, it is frightening for me. Having been on a craft and seen their technology, it is frightening that we are developing at that rate. But on the planet, as the Greys have said, we are retrograde spiritually. And I've described this before in my speeches, so I'll do it again because there's people here for the first time who won't have heard it. But they described us as being like in the muddy water at the edge of a river. So a river is clear running in the middle, there's a channel, deep channel in the middle, and the flow is swift and clean. But as you move out towards the banks, it can get muddier and sludgier. There can be slime growing on the top, mosquitoes breeding, people are throwing their rubbish in there, etc. And there may be pollution and bits of oil slicks skimming around. And they said spiritually that's where we are. And if we are to eventually to have contact with them in any shape or form, we have to be moved back into the flow of the river, back into the flow of energy, life, brightness, and spirituality, compassion, and all of those positive words that we talk about on a daily basis but don't necessarily adhere to. So with our modern technology coming up and some of the, particularly scary, some of the warfare technology that's being developed, if they're going to put AI into that, or they're going to eventually use consciousness in that, we are dead. We don't stand a chance, and the ETs know that. So the agenda that I outline in my book, and the different waves of souls that have come into the planet to work at this time for various reasons, are here to help raise that spirituality. But when I say that, it's a bit trite really, because nobody can raise their spirituality but themselves. You can listen to any amount of speeches, you can read any amount of books, and you can quote from them and sound very knowledgeable. But if you're not enacting it, what's the point? So the role of spirituality in our future technology is going to be needed, and it's going to be paramount, or we won't survive. And consciousness, once it is inserted in the technology, is going to complicate matters further. We're only on the very beginning, kindergarten steps of that. If you have an extremely bad vibe, you don't last on a craft. You're not even going to be a part of a visit or a program that I talk about or anything like that. If your vibes are bad, you can't operate this stuff. It operates on pure consciousness. It operates on power of intent. When I learnt to fly a scout craft, it was flown with power of intent. If my power of intent was bad, I'd have crashed. So we have this curious mixture that we don't even really understand yet, and that is spirituality and consciousness. You can expand your consciousness and reach into your consciousness and achieve all sorts of things in meditation or whatever. But if it is not an inherent part of your daily life, then the spirituality isn't there to go hand in hand with it. And both of those words in red have to go hand in hand with advanced technology. So what is happening is, you know, there's a bit of a race going on, because we've probably got the military doing their darndest to beat everyone to develop the technology. And they undoubtedly have all the consciousness stuff in it, and they will have trained people to use it. And those trained people may not necessarily know what it's going to be used for ultimately. Because I know a military air traffic controller in the States who was bringing in alien craft at a secret base on the back of a truck with 5 other air traffic controllers, and they had a guard standing over them with a gun, and they weren't allowed to talk to each other. So you can be using advanced technology because you've been taught the skills, but someone else might be pulling the strings ultimately of how it's used and what it's developed for. And I'm a great believer in people power, that we can make a difference, and we need to make a difference. So the vibrant colours began to emanate from the figures, at first like little tongues of flame, but quickly engulfing their entire bodies with kaleidoscopes of blazing intensity. And when Dr. Rudy Schuld read this chapter, he was really fascinated, because he studies consciousness and writes about it. And I'm not sure that I entirely agree with him, but his opinion, which he wrote in the book, and I left it in there, I thought about taking it out, but I thought, no, I can't do that, it's his, is that he said it was the closest that he could think of that human beings got to having a consciousness sexual experience with the ETs. And really, if you think of the extreme euphoria and how that euphoria went right through the physical body and through your consciousness, I guess that's probably a good description. An energetic dance of the mind, mentally and spiritually joining with each other, becoming effervescent, swirling and exploding. Surrounded by pure thought, intelligent light, a glimpse of our own future. humans will be able to manifest in various forms in the future, and the Greys said that, and that's why they were trying to see what we could do, because they're helping to develop technology on our planet too, through the military and secret agreements, but also through people they train on the craft who are in science and technology, who have embedded what I call thought seeds put into their mind, which comes out in their work, and they start inventing stuff, and it's leading the way towards the alien technology. It's going in that direction. Okay, moving on now, and this is related to it. In chapter 18 I described the galaxy screen, which showed holograms of the galaxy, and this happened sometime between 1978 and 1983 when I was living in a remote area of New Zealand. And I was taken into a room because I expressed an interest in space, and I was shown a galaxy screen. As you can see, it has a minute grid on it like graph paper, and it had our Milky Way on it, and the Grey was able to touch any square on the screen, and up would come in holographic form whatever was in that part of the Milky Way. He could bring it up and zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, because there might be a huge area covered by that grid, and he could zoom in on a specific part of it, etc. And he showed me planet Earth there in hologram form, and said to prepare myself because he was going to show me something shocking. And he reached into my mind and pulled out a concept I would understand, and that was, it's going to give you fire in your belly. So he showed me, and it took me back to the time, took the hologram back to the time when the Hiroshima explosion occurred in Japan. And he showed the shock wave, and that's what we talked about earlier on with that rocket that was photographed by a satellite, the shock wave. And he showed me the shock wave emanating out from it, and he kept reducing and reducing and reducing the size of the planet until the other planets in the solar system started coming into the big spherical hologram. And the shock wave was still going out, and it was going right out through the system, our solar system, and beyond. And he said, this is a lesson to you, because you have absolutely no idea the frequency shock that you create with this atomic warfare. You have absolutely no idea what it does to you, what it does to your future generations, and what it does to those species that are, and creatures that are out there. And as it went further and further out, that it just got more and more unstable, until it seemed to be, the holographic image of it seemed to be floundering around and waving like this, and it was just going on and on and on. And it was shocking. I was in tears. And this is what we're doing to ourselves and to other species, and this is why Robert Salas has gone from being a person who worked in the military with Minuteman missiles to an anti-nuclear campaigner.
We just over 2,000 nuclear.
Exactly. Can you imagine what went out into space? No wonder they all came rushing here thinking, what the hell are these people doing? Don't they understand? And the Grey said to me, time could stop for you, and there would be nothing left of you on this grid. Just a cloud of dust. So there we are, the role of spirituality and consciousness. I've kept on repeating that to drum it into you. The role of spirituality and consciousness in our future technology. Now, do you have any power over that? Yes? No? Yes? Who says yes? Who says no? Come on, you can say no. Most days it feels like no, doesn't it? For all of us it feels like no. But yes, we can, with the power of our mind and speaking out and doing everything you can in your community and your society to make a change. And it doesn't mean you have to become an anti-nuclear campaigner or become au fait with advanced technology. It simply means you change your mindset and you change the way that you talk to other people. You change your intent. We're living in a time of global chaos and dramatic climate change. Now, it's irrelevant now what is causing the climate change. Aren't you tired of the arguments about whether it's our fault or someone else's fault? What does that matter now? What are we actually going to do? And is it too late? And how much can we salvage? And how can each of us help? So many people write to me, Suzy, what can I do? Well, look at your life that you lead every day and analyse it and decide what you could change for the better. It's that simple. You don't have to go out and join some amazing group and you know, become some administrator somewhere or whatever, or march the streets even. It is quite simple. You change your intent. When you change your intent, you start looking at recycling, you start looking at growing vegetables, you start looking after people you know who need looking after, you're kind to animals. You try to choose organic things, you try to choose things that are ethical or whatever. You just analyse your life, bang, 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 bang. Keep a diary for a week, read it afterwards, make changes. It's that simple. You don't have to be doing something wondrous. Because what you're changing is power of intent, frequency, energy. And this is why we need to do this. In chapter 19 of my book, I describe a meeting at an undersea base, disclosure of a different kind, where we were they talked to us about the timeline to disclosure, what it meant, what it was. And really, they're in control of that. Because if governments released a whole lot of stuff tomorrow, would you necessarily believe it all? I campaigned, you know, I lobbied the Chief of Defence in New Zealand for the release of the files, and I'm not claiming, you know, I'm not claiming that I did that. I simply prodded him into looking at what the rest of the Commonwealth was doing, and he decided it was a good idea. But it was probably going to happen sooner or later because we were following Australia and Canada and England. And we're just a bit far behind because we're more remote and we're tiny. So it was going to happen. But you know, really there wasn't a lot in it. And we didn't expect that there would be. Our files, our archives at UFORQ NZ, we've got way over 10,000 sightings. And we got far more detail about sightings in New Zealand than were in those files. It was a whitewash. But we did it as a public relations exercise to get New Zealanders looking at UFO sightings and what's going on, and it worked. So there are things you can do. You're not going to get them to... the aim was not to get them to front up with the material. The aim was to get the rest of New Zealand to look at the subject. So, in these experiences, I was taken to a base where there was seating like a grandstand, and up the front there was a human in overalls and grey. And on many occasions on craft, undersea, underground, on craft, there are humans in a chain of command. They're not hybrids, they're humans. And they were very positive. They were not negative. It was not scary. I didn't have MyLabs or anything like that. These are a separate group that has been working with ETs for a long time. A lot of them are scientists. They have a military-like organisation in that they are very well organised, but that's the limit of it being military. And in 1980, the Grey stated that in the future there will be wild speculation, enthrallment, blame, fear, and a multitude of theories pertaining to the idea of contact with extraterrestrials. Well, we're going through that now. We've been going through it for some time. Everybody's got an idea. I was recently called a nuts and bolts experiencer because I've been on a 3D craft. I'm, you know, whereas this person just goes and sits and meditates and and calls in ETs all around them who have a conversation. So that may well be so, because I know lots of people who have some amazing experiences and come out with some amazing information. But here again is this one-upmanship thing. You know, my experience is better because I go to 5D. You're only on a 3D craft. You had to be taken on a craft. This just is so childish. But this is what's happening out there. And it's interesting that, you know, the States, when I went there in February, has really changed. We now in Australia and New Zealand are light years behind where they're at. The whole situation over there has changed. So many more scientists involved. And people say, we don't want to hear the airy-fairy nonsense anymore, the love and light. We want some details. We want some meat. We want some information. We want something to think about. Not something that's airy-fairy and you leave the lecture hall and you can't remember 2 hours later what the person said. People actually want information to mull over and consider and weigh up against what they already know and understand. So we're going to see in the future more and more cults in the next 10 years. And the interesting thing is that I'm not naming names, but worldwide there are certain researchers who have basically created a cult following. You know, people will blindly follow them because, oh, they're well known. You know, they've put out a book or they've done this, they've done that. And some of these people are extremely good at selling themselves, extremely good at advertising themselves and beating themselves up, talking themselves up, and so, you know, they are getting all the conference invites, and others struggle. I've struggled for years and years and years, speaking in Australia and New Zealand, Australia and New Zealand. And so some researchers have got very good at holding people back and holding people down because it suits them. And people need to wake up and start really looking at what's going on. Start really looking at the integrity in the UFO field. Really start thinking, don't just blindly listen to what a person says and the information they offer. Do your own research. Write to that person. I always say, when I sell a book or give a person a book, if you have questions, you contact me and I will try to answer them. And if I can't, we'll discuss it on Skype. We'll throw ideas around. I spend hours talking to people and writing to people because I'm learning too. My information is not the be-all and end-all. I won't stop learning till I die. So people need to start being more discerning and thinking about where they're being led up blind alleys. Let's face it, there are some very good researchers out there, Kathleen Marden, Robert Salas and many others. But really in the States, people want to hear from the people who've had the experience and been on the craft, and they want the middleman to start stepping aside. Because when you put information through the third party, it is always going to get distorted. In 1987, the same Gray said there'll be widespread chaos and a dead stage on the planet. The human psyche will experience global despondency and people will be at a loss to know where to go, even physically or geographically, or where to turn for assistance and guidance. And I think I said last time I spoke here in 2015, when I was going to speak in the UK and Denmark, I was coming down through Italy and the refugees and immigrants were coming up. And I was seeing people with nowhere to go, nowhere to belong, no help, too many of them to help. And the Greys have said that a lot of our humanitarian service groups will be overwhelmed. They won't be able to cope. They won't be able to get through. There'll be no assistance. And we've seen that already. We've seen that in New Orleans. We've seen it in Haiti. And we've seen it throughout Africa where they can't get help through. It's overwhelming. they also said that, or I said that I understood from these lectures that these groups are trained, these humans working with these ETs are trained, they're integrated right across societies worldwide, and they are creating a societal framework upon which contact can rest. And when that will be is dependent on us and how far we elevate ourselves in the interim. I also wrote communicators, that's people who've had any form of contact with ETs are being activated quickly now worldwide, and when more of them start communicating their experiences and understanding of extraterrestrial contact themselves through a variety of means, it will facilitate an unlocking process in people who as yet have little or no conscious memory of why they incarnated in this life. How communicators present their knowledge and experiences to the public will be crucial. That's with integrity and with truthfulness. This ongoing process of triggering human consciousness is part of our expansion of awareness, a microcosmic reflection of our expanding universe. And the best way to predict the future, folks, is to create it. Thank you.